Yeah, we're the center of the universe at the moment, and it feels like that. There's lots of it's sort of all anyone's talking about is the presidential election. Nerves are high on both sides of the aisle. There's lots of national and international media paying attention to us. So I think everyone's kind of holding their breath until the polls close in a few hours.
And from what you are seeing on the ground as well, what are the biggest issues? Would the economy, cost of living, would that be top of mind for voters in Pennsylvania?
It is for a lot of voters, and that really helps to determine who you're voting for. So Trump voters are seeing economy at the top of mind, whereas Harris voters are seeing other kinds of issues like reproductive rights and other kinds of things as more top of the mind.
You know, Donald Trump, in a speech in Michigan, said that, he had a 95% chance of winning this election. And that's in addition to his unsubstantiated claims that there is voter fraud already happening. So has he already set the stage for himself not to accept any result other than a win?
I think that's clearly the plan, right? That there have already been a couple of lawsuits, one big one out of Bucks County here in Pennsylvania, about how votes are being counted. So yeah, I would expect that that we're not, regardless of what happens with the voting, we're not going to see a concession speech from Donald Trump anytime soon.
And what are the sort of concerns, the security concerns associated with that? Do you think things can get very tense given what happened 4 years ago on January 6th?
Yeah, I think that's at the top of the mind of a lot of Americans. I think, again, on both sides of the aisle, there's a real concern about electoral violence, just because we've never had that, if we're at least not in sort of anyone's living memory. And so that was really jarring. And I think a lot of people are still kind of processing that and sort of nervous about what the next steps will be.
Yeah, and looking at, beyond those 7 so-called swing states because of the margin of victory in the last election, really interesting polling in Iowa, a red state that has poll numbers favoring Kamala Harris. Is there a sense among Democrats that they might even flip that state?
So there is, and it's hard for us to know exactly how well how seriously to take this poll. It's an excellent poll. It tends to outperform other polls, but typically when you see an outlier poll like that, it ought to make you a little nervous. But the reality is, if it's saying something that's real and true and strong in Iowa, that has big effects for Michigan and Wisconsin, which are similar states that are considered a little bit more swingy.
Of course, and one of the things that was indicative in that Iowa poll was that older female voters are favoring Kamala Harris. How big a factor will that female vote be in this election?
This is the biggest gender gap we have ever seen in a presidential election. We've been talking about it for a long time, and it's never materialized as that huge. It's always there a little tiny bit. But if Harris wins, it will be down to women, particularly older women. If Trump wins, it'll be down to men, particularly younger men.
Yep. And one very astounding figure before polling day even began was that around 80 million people, in fact, have already cast their ballots, early voting or postal ballots. That's more than half of the votes that were cast in the 2020 election. Now, the Associated Press is saying that this rise is being driven by more Republicans casting their votes. So does this make things all the more unpredictable tomorrow when it comes to the overall counting?
It really does, because in the last few elections, we have believed that the early vote is going to skew much more Democratic because the Trump campaign has tried to convince its voters to turn out just on election day. We're not seeing that this time, so we don't know what how those voters are actually voting. We know many more Republicans are voting this time. But we don't know, are those Republicans who are voting early because they dislike Donald Trump, or has the Trump campaign gotten its message through?
Okay, really good to get your insights there from Pennsylvania. Kristin Kanthak, thanks so much.
Thank you.